and I'm the minister of Unitarian Universalist Church West, which is also on North Avenue, but we are east of here. We're down near 130th. And we're actually right across the street from the United Methodist Church, Peace Church, which is right across from us. You have several of us from the North Avenue crew here tonight. So I'd like you to imagine a church where no one tells you that you have to take anything on faith. Imagine a church where you're asked to use your intelligence, your intuition, and the experiences of your own life to discern what you believe about God. That is part of what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist. Unitarian Universalism, or UU for short, is a liberal religion that has as one of its most cherished values the belief that there is a basic goodness at the heart of every person, and that every person has both the right and the responsibility to discern his or her own beliefs about God, Jesus, life after death, the meaning of life, and how to be a good person. To know how we Unitarian Universalists understand God and how that understanding is reflected in our prayer and in our worship life, you have to know a little bit about how our religion came to be. Originally, we were two different faith groups, the Unitarians and the Universalists, both of which grew up and out of liberal New England congregational Christianity in this country starting in about the mid-1700s. Both religions originated in part as a protest against two Calvinist doctrines, the doctrine of original sin or total depravity, and the doctrine of predestination, the doctrine of the elect, the belief that God has determined whether you will go to heaven or hell before you were even born. The Unitarians were Christians who believed that people should interpret the Bible in the light of human reason. Their reading of the Bible led them to believe that all people had the potential for good or evil, depending on both the life they chose to live and the social environment in which they were born and raised. In addition, their understanding of the Bible led them to regard Jesus as more of an ethical and moral teacher than as a supernatural being. They believed that God was one, Unitarian instead of Trinitarian. Unitarianism, interestingly enough, was the religion of many of our country's founding fathers, folks like Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson was a deist, which is a religious philosophy that arose during the 18th century among those who found unbelievable the Christian Trinity, the divinity of Jesus, and the miracles. They also couldn't believe in the inerrancy of Scripture, but they did feel that nothing but a transcendent God could explain the beauty and complexity of the natural world and the human ability to seek meaning. The deists said that God was that first cause that created a universe that was controlled by immutable laws, and that once that universe was set into motion, God stepped away and no longer intervenes in human affairs. Deism was the religious philosophy of Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine, but Jefferson may have described their philosophy better than most, and with a phrase that rings true for many of today's Unitarian Universalists when he said, "Question with boldness even the existence of a God." The term universalism originally meant that every person would eventually be reconciled to God. And of course, Kathleen spoke about that as well. Many, many Protestant denominations are universalists now in their theology. The Universalists didn't believe that a loving God would condemn any of God's people to eternity in hell. And like the Unitarians, they too came to cherish the freedom to doubt and to question all doctrines and creeds. In the 19th century, Unitarians like Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau and James Freeman Clarke began to study the religious literature of Hinduism and Islam, of Confucianism, Buddhism, and Zoroastrianism. These scriptures were being translated into European languages for the first time, and as they read these scriptures, they found that the ideas there were very much like their own, and they saw reflected in them the common human urge to know the sacred and the common human ability to feel awe and wonder. And those discoveries back in the 1850s are the foundation of the present Unitarian Universalist openness to wisdom from all the world's religions. During the mid-20th century, many Unitarian Universalists became humanists. They felt that the advances in science had made belief in God irrelevant, and they came to the conclusion that a person did not have to believe in God in any way to live a moral and ethical life. Humanists feel that the highest purpose for human beings is the development, the forwarding of human character, so that the world might become a better place for all people. The Universalists followed a similar pathway to the Unitarians, though they retained their reverence for Jesus longer than the Unitarians did. But by the 1950s, both religions had moved solidly outside the boundaries that others defined as Christianity. And in 1961, they merged to form our larger denominational body, which is called the Unitarian Universalist Association. As one faith, Unitarian Universalists together continued to be open to learning from religious and cultural movements, like the anti-war and feminist movements, which brought an awareness of Native American religions and pre-Christian goddess-centered religions into our congregations. The growth of Western Buddhism has also been an important influence on Unitarian Universalism in the past 3 decades. About 10% of our members are people who were raised with a Jewish religious or cultural background, and these folks have brought the richness of their religious understandings into our faith tradition. And religiously mixed families have found a home in our congregations as well, and have brought to us both their needs and their traditions. This is why, in part, you'll find people with a wide variety of beliefs about God in today's Unitarian Universalist congregations. Humanists, agnostics, different kinds of theists, including deists, panentheists, naturalistic theists, neo-pagans, liberal Christians. There also are Unitarian Universalist atheists, and those who claim Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, Islam, or another religious tradition as very important to their spiritual and religious lives. But whatever our personal beliefs, we Unitarian Universalists generally agree that it's the fruits of religious belief that matter more than the beliefs themselves. How our religion shows in our lives is far more important than our beliefs about God. We pay careful attention to the ways we live, intending that our lives express our faith through expressing gratitude for blessings, having worthy aspirations, helping renew hope in others through service, and taking action to create a world that is more free, peaceful, compassionate, and just than the world we live in today. My particular congregation has made some very significant commitments. We are what's known as a welcoming congregation for people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. This is based for us in part in our affirmation of the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We also are what's called a green sanctuary congregation, which means we have made a commitment to live as sustainably as possible on the earth. If you drive past our building, you'll see a visible symbol of that. We have solar panels on the roof of the church, and there are many other ways that we do this as well. And quite recently, we were named as a peace advocacy congregation for 7 years, 7 ongoing years of peace work, individual peace, community peace, and global peace work that we've been doing. So in our worship life, our focus tends to be less on God and more on the social and moral and ethical issues that confront us, as well as on concerns of human and spiritual growth. Our diversity means we can't assume that everyone in the room will have a common belief in God in any way, or that they all will believe in God at all. And actually, when I'm in the pulpit and I'm leading a prayer or a meditation in our worship services, I often actually don't use the word God, because our American culture has assigned a meaning to that word that I know most of my congregation members don't believe in. They don't believe that God is a personal, supernatural God who's watching over them and knows everything and is all-powerful and is taking care of them personally. Those in my congregation who are willing to use the word God to describe what they do believe are more likely to experience God as a force for good in the world, something like a spark of the divine that's present in each living thing, yet is greater than the sum of all those divine sparks together. So whether or not they believe in God in any way, what we find is that most people who come to Unitarian Universalist churches are seeking to be connected to something deeper and more meaningful than they can know by themselves. They often are the spiritual but not religious people who are seeking a sense of connection with what theologian Paul Tillich called the depth dimension of life. This depth dimension is what we reach for in worship and in the prayers of our community. A joyful, deep connection with larger issues of meaning and purpose, a joyful, deep connection with each other that inspires us to live our values and to take our religion out into the world to make our world a better place, not only for human beings, but for all living beings. So that's it for me. 2 minutes to spit it out.